Thanks a lot to Claire Melis, to Jenny Robinson, and Oren Iftachel, and also Jordan, for the UCL Urban Laboratory initiative to put together this incredible conference, which I regret a lot I won't be able to attend due to health issues and conditions that I could not control. But at least I will try to address this opening plenary, putting on the table some questions and some issues that I think are important to take into account during those incredible days of discussion. And I would start by saying that the urban scene today, and I'm talking about south, north, eastern cities, and any other cardinal points cities, we are talking about the global urban crisis. It's a urban and a housing crisis, but also is a political crisis, and those two issues are absolutely connected. And again, as any other global phenomena, any other global trend, the crisis, this urban crisis, this political crisis, express itself in a very, very particular and different way in the different countries, in the different sub-regional territories, depending, of course, on the political economy of the urban, the housing, the land. But there are some common elements that I want to stress out and to point out now here. The first one is what I call the hyper-capture of built space as a tradable asset, capable to generate rent or interest to an incredible mass of surplus capital which is circulating today in financial circuits globally, in a constant hunger for new assets. And this mass of capital is indeed interfering in every city, in every continent, of course, in a very different way, and also connected with local interests, local actors, local players in a very different way, of course. The second common element that we can point out in this global scene is this very acute process of displacements in a major scale. They can have different names in different places, but we are talking about new forms of competition over space that is producing more and more banishment and exclusion from living spaces of those who are more vulnerable or poor. And then we will see later, we will point out later that of course there is a race issue, ethnic issue related to that, gender issue related to that as well. The third is the crisis, the political crisis, I would say, the crisis of the model of government, the crisis of the model of governance. It's the crisis of the model, which was invented 250 years ago and was disseminated over the planet, the idea of the democracy of freeholders, in which property has a very, very deep connection with rights, individual rights, but also civil rights and citizenship. And this democracy of freeholders had really been experienced in ways in different countries, but also had nurtured dreams of transforming lives by reconfiguring territories in operations conducted by the state. And yes, I'm talking about urban planning and the connection of urban planning with welfare state or state intervention in a very broad scale in some specific countries. I'm talking about Europe, but I'm also talking about the socialist and communist experience. But I'm talking about an actor, a central actor of these operations of reconfiguration, which is the state, but also the very deep connection between those state-led operations and the idea of a democracy and the idea that the state is the legitimate representative of the people. So what the question is, what we can point out as having in common between refugee camps in many different countries and cities, squatter buildings, again, many different countries and cities, massive evictions, overcrowding, raising homelessness, which is also a global trend, generation rent and rent struggles on rise in some specific cities. So what all those issues, all those phenomena that we are witnessing in many, many places, they have in common. So we are talking about a kind of exclusionary machinery of making access to housing and living space more and more difficult to more and more people. But also, what we are witnessing, again, across cardinal points, cities, south, north, east, is the making of makeshift cities. Makeshift cities means self-produced in a precarious way, in an unprovised, non-planned, in relation to, but also in conflict with, the paradigm of urban planning and organization. So we are talking about displacements, very acute, but we also are talking about emplacements. So the movement that is led by the people themselves in order to survive, to prosper, to create landscapes for life in what was left for anybody, because most of the built space now is head towards the creations of rent-seeking landscapes with the complicit position of the state. Yes, we are talking about a moment, especially in northern cities, of the destruction of the welfare system, but at the same time, the invasion of the other and the presence of the other, and I'm talking about immigrants and refugees, as a very racialized category, this other, and the complete reconfiguration of governments of space because of the fear, because of the rise of xenophobia, and because of the sentiments that are related to this presence, to this non-welcome presence, which is also not new. And in the case of United States, if we talk about Black communities and how Black communities have inserted and being related with the mainstream city, and also if we talk about indigenous communities in Latin America, we are talking about a very long history of banishment, which is also playing a game here. But here we are talking maybe when we see those types of things happening in cities that were not precisely marked by this type of banishment, of exclusion, we can mobilize Michel Foucault's category of the boomerang effect, which is planning operations that were very, very idly being used in settler colonial strategies to impose power by denying modes of existence, by imposing one and only way of relating people to territories, to private property, to freehold, and to organized paradigm of the real estate indicators, but also through the use of military force, and military force in one side, cultural imposition in the other side. But now what we are seeing is, and this is the boomerang, that what was employed and experienced and enforced for the first time in colonial settings, now in post-colonial era, they are coming back and being transformed into these new tactics of combating internal war, internal enemy. So we are talking about these new private regimes of territorial control and governance organized through control, safety, and militarization and criminalization of the others, at the same time imposing who is the other and defining a war on those territories, but also imposing through public-private partnerships, through the imposition of new forms of organizing space like the shopping centers, new ways of life, and defining also the border of who are the others, what are the ways who are condemned, and what are the spaces who are condemned to live under permanent transitoriness as being a place which is not according to the rule. But of course, experiences of living under and in between the porosities of this super military, securitized imposition of a built space also emerged. And here I am referring to the process of building an insurgent citizenship from those emplacements where the majority of the people live. But also I'm talking about the tensions between this insurgent, this citizenship, and what we knew and we describe, and the bibliography also described, as new liberalism. And we are clearly describing here the new liberalism from above. But the key issue that I want to finish my talk by pointing out is that here also we have a boomerang, because private regimes of territorial control are also completely embedded in those non-order territories. So we are talking about delinquent private regimes of territorial control under the superimposition of power of drug traffickers, of militia, which is also organized around global trade, around trade in a global scale, and it's completely related to business only. And with the same repertoire. So we are talking about a repertoire of extortion, of extractivism, and also a repertoire of risk, and a repertoire of mobilizing fear as a huge category, together with a crisis of political representation. Nobody believes on state and state institutions as means of processing conflicts. And also with the complicit role of planning, creating flexible instruments in order to open new frontiers for financial capital, but also the complicit role of planning on providing where delinquent regimes of private territorial control can go. So because those are those perimeters are the perimeters defined by ambiguity and permanent transitoriness. Yes, I won't finish like that. It's such a dystopic scenery, global, at the global scale. But I think it's a very interesting time, since all those processes are very much related, to reimagine politics, to reimagine territories creation and territories transformation, to finally get rid of this model that links only property and propertyhood with citizenship and business as the only way to relate it to territory. So I praise you and I welcome here all the struggles around commoning, all the struggles around demercantilization, all the struggles around creating new spaces of encounter, new spaces of mediation of conflict, new spaces of creating utopias and imagination. Thank you very much.